Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are exploring a concept that I guarantee you've heard talked about endlessly.
Oh, yeah, everywhere.
Right. But the thing is, it is fundamentally misunderstood by, well, almost everyone. We're talking about the serious, clinical, and spiritual practice of gratitude.
And we really need to set the parameters for you right out of the gate here.
Yeah, please do.
Because we are not talking about the fluffy, greeting card version of gratitude. We're not looking at some toxic positivity slogan that's just like designed to paste a smile over the genuinely hard realities of your life.
Right, like those good vibes only mugs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We are looking at gratitude as a rigorous, demanding discipline.
And to do that, we are drawing upon a really incredible, rich stack of source material today.
We really are. We're pulling from the clinical research of leading psychologists. So people like Robert Emmons, Michael McCullough, Martin Seligman, and Barbara Fredrickson.
But we're also pairing that hard empirical science with the profound existential insights of the spiritual writer Henri Nouwen.
Yeah, it's a fascinating mix.
It is. So our mission for this deep dive is to trace what gratitude actually is at its absolute root. We're going to look at what it literally does to the human brain and body, like the actual mechanics of it.
For physical footprint.
Exactly. And we'll explore how it acts as the invisible moral glue for human society. And crucially, how it survives the darkest, most shattering seasons of a life.
Because if it doesn't survive those, what's the point?
Right. So by the end of our conversation, the goal is to hand you a practical, road-tested blueprint for building gratitude. Not as this, fleeting mood that depends on good weather, but as an unshakable cognitive and emotional discipline.
So to set the philosophical stage for all the clinical data we're going to unpack, we should actually start with a piece of ancient history.
Yeah, let's go there.
It's a story from the Gospel of Luke about 10 men with leprosy. And whether you approach this as a religious text or just simply an ancient psychological case study, it doesn't matter. The dynamic it highlights is foundational to literally everything we're discussing today.
Well, we really need to understand the context of leprosy in the ancient world, too. Because it wasn't just a physical diagnosis.
No, not at all.
It wasn't just like getting a rash and taking medicine. It was an absolute sentence of exile. It legally and socially removed a person from their community.
From their family, from their trade.
From their entire place in ordinary human life. You were legally declared unclean. You were forced to live completely outside the boundaries of everything that made life livable.
It's devastating.
So when you contracted this disease, yes, you lost your health, but more devastatingly, you lost your belonging.
And so the narrative describes 10 of these men encountering Jesus on the road into a village. And because of their social and legal status, they're required to keep their distance.
Right.
So they call out from afar, asking for mercy, and the text says he heals all 10 of them.
Just like that.
Just like that. The physical disease vanishes, the lesions disappear, the nerve damage is reversed. Suddenly, the ability to walk back into their homes, to touch their children, to sit at a communal table, all of that is handed back to them in a single, incomprehensible instant.
And all 10 are completely healed, but only one comes back.
Just one.
Only one turns around to give thanks. And there's a really specific historical detail noted here, which is that this one man who returns is a Samaritan.
Which is a huge detail.
It is. Because in the cultural context of that time, the Samaritans and the Jewish people were deeply divided. They did not share religious, social, or geographic life at all.
They were enemies, essentially.
Yeah. So this man was a double outsider. He had been exiled first by his heritage and then exiled by his disease. Yet he is the only one who throws himself down in absolute gratitude. Which leads to this penetrating question that has echoed through 2,000 years. We're not 10 cleansed. Where are the 9?
Where are the 9?
Okay, let's unpack this. Because my immediate instinct, and probably the instinct of anyone listening to this right now, is to look at those 9 guys who kept walking and just judge them.
Oh, absolutely.
It's so easy to label them as ungrateful, arrogant, selfish villains. Like, you get the miracle of a lifetime and you don't even say thank you.
Right.
But reading through our clinical sources completely flipped my perspective on this. Because those 9 men weren't villains.
No, they really weren't.
They were just humans operating on the default factory settings of human psychology.
Yeah.
They adapted to a new reality, and they moved on without pausing to recognize the gift.
And that That is the core thesis we have to build from today. The physical intervention, the healing happened to all 10 men equally, but the one who returned received something much deeper than just functioning limbs and clear skin.
He got something else entirely.
He received a sense of wholeness. The 9 were cured of a bodily disease. The one who returned was made whole. And to understand the mechanics of how that one man achieved that wholeness, we have to completely unlearn what modern culture has taught us about gratitude.
We have to move out of antiquity and step directly into the modern psychology lab.
Exactly. So let's talk about Robert Emmons at the University of California, Davis. What strikes me about Emmons is that he didn't set out to become the world's leading expert on gratitude.
No, he really didn't.
If you look at the psychological landscape in the 1980s and 90s, gratitude wasn't considered a serious subject. It was viewed as this soft moral sentiment.
Like the stuff of manners and thank you notes.
Right, not peer-reviewed science. Psychology at the time was heavily focused on pathology, on what breaks the human mind, not on what elevates it.
Yeah, Emmons was actually a personality psychologist. He was studying human motivation, like striving, goal setting, what makes people tick. But as he ran his studies, he kept hitting this really strange variable. He would observe 2 different people who achieved the exact same favorable outcome. They reached the same goal, got the same promotion, experienced the same stroke of luck.
The exact same external circumstances.
Right. And one of them would be deeply moved, deeply satisfied by it, but the other would remain entirely untouched, like almost immediately looking for the next thing to conquer.
And Emmons realized that this invisible variable, this capacity to actually be moved by a benefit, was radically altering human outcomes. So he brought gratitude into the lab to figure out why the 9 men keep walking. And he identified a phenomenon he called the adaptation problem.
The adaptation problem. If there's one concept you take away from this deep dive, it really should be this one.
Definitely.
The adaptation problem is the biological reality that human minds are wired to adapt to mercy and goodness just as effectively and just as quickly as they adapt to pain.
And to understand why that happens, you have to look at evolutionary biology. Human beings are fundamentally wired to scan for threats.
Yeah, to stay alive.
Right. For our ancestors living on the savannah, survival depended on noticing the rustle in the bushes that might be a predator. It did not depend on noticing a beautiful sunset or a pleasant breeze.
A sunset isn't going to eat you.
Exactly. We are biologically engineered to notice what is wrong, what is missing, what is dangerous, and what is out of place. So when goodness arrives, especially when it arrives quietly or when it becomes a consistent part of our daily lives, it just doesn't trigger that threat detection system.
Just bypasses it.
Yeah, so it tends to disappear from our conscious attention with really alarming speed.
Because what becomes normal becomes expected. And what becomes expected entirely vanishes from our view.
Completely.
You can literally be living inside a reality composed entirely of gifts, of mercies, of infrastructure you didn't build, lucky breaks you didn't earn, and you become completely blind to all of it. Our sources refer to this as perceptual poverty.
I love that phrase, perceptual poverty.
It perfectly captures the issue, doesn't it? Ingratitude, in its most common everyday form, isn't usually a malicious arrogance. It's a narrowing of the visual field.
And perceptual poverty explains a very specific, very tragic kind of person. It explains the resentful, chronically disappointed individual.
We all know someone like this.
We do. This is the person who has a high-definition, microscopic view of every single slight, every failure, every instance where the world didn't give them exactly what they wanted. They see their wounds with perfect clarity.
But they go completely blind to the immense machinery of mercy and cooperation that is literally keeping them alive.
Right. They are suffering from a profoundly distorted relationship to their life rather than necessarily suffering from a bad life itself.
So to counter this biological drift toward blindness, Emmons established a clinical definition of gratitude. He argues it is not just a vague, warm feeling of being happy that things are going your way.
No, it takes work.
It's a cognitive process that requires 2 distinct deliberate movements. So movement 1 is recognizing that something good has been received. You have to actually log the benefit in your conscious mind.
And movement 2 is recognizing that the source of that good lies, at least in part, outside the self.
Right.
Both movements are absolutely mandatory. If we go back to our ancient story, the 9 men clearly experienced the first movement. They recognized that something good happened. They looked at their hands and saw that the leprosy was gone.
But they failed to execute the second movement.
Exactly. They failed to recognize, or at least they failed to acknowledge, that the source of that massive benefit was external and that receiving it called for a response. Without that second movement, a benefit just remains a cold, hard fact of your day. It never transforms into a gift.
Okay, I want to push back on this second movement, though, on behalf of everyone listening, because this is where Emmons' research collides violently with modern culture.
Oh, it really does.
Movement 2 insists that the source of the good lies outside the self. But our culture is absolutely obsessed with the myth of the self-made person.
The hustle culture.
Yes, we worship grit. We worship the grind. It's all, I built this business, I put in the 80-hour weeks, sacrificed my weekends, this is my time, my career, my success. If we train our minds to constantly attribute everything to an outside source, doesn't that inherently diminish the value of our own hard work? Like, doesn't it make us passive?
I'm glad you brought that up because that tension is exactly what makes the study of gratitude so rigorous. No serious researcher is arguing that effort doesn't matter.
Okay.
Discipline, sacrifice, late nights, early mornings, all of that is deeply important. But the clinical truth is that no one is self-made in an ultimate sense. The refusal to acknowledge the external forces that enable our hard work isn't a sign of rugged independence. It's a form of cognitive blindness.
Because if you really trace it back, we inherit so much before we even reach the starting line.
Think about the mechanics of achievement. We inherit language before we can even conceptualize a business plan.
We inherit roads we didn't pave.
Exactly. Legal systems that protect our contracts, antibiotics that keep us from dying of a scraped knee, and tools built by generations of people whose names are just lost to history.
We're born into a thoroughly furnished world.
That's a great way to put it. Even when you work incredibly hard to build a career, you are doing so using an intellect you were given by genetics, shaped by teachers who took the time to correct your mistakes, and sustained by an invisible web of sheer luck.
Right.
Gratitude doesn't negate your effort. It simply makes your perception accurate. It forces you to run an honest accounting of how you got where you are.
So if you look at your life and genuinely think you did it 100% yourself, your math is just fundamentally wrong.
Completely wrong.
Which brings us to Henri Nouwen. Nouwen arrives at this exact same conclusion about accurate perception, but his journey there is entirely different from Emmons' clinical lab work.
Totally different. Henri Nouwen was a Dutch Catholic priest, a brilliant theologian, and a prominent academic. He had this incredible pedigree teaching at Notre Dame, Yale, and Harvard.
He authored dozens of wildly successful books. By any conventional worldly metric, he had reached the absolute pinnacle of intellectual and professional success.
But internally, his journals reveal that he wrestled intensely with profound loneliness and a desperate ache for belonging that no amount of prestige could satisfy.
Then he makes a decision that just baffled all his peers. In 1986, right at the height of his influence at Harvard, he walks away.
He just leaves.
He leaves the Ivy League and moves to L'Arche Daybreak in Canada. And L'Arche is a community where assistants live alongside people with severe intellectual and physical disabilities.
So Nouwen goes from lecturing the brightest, most ambitious minds in the world to spending his days bathing, feeding, and sitting with people who couldn't read a single word of his famous books.
People that a highly productive, meritocratic society had largely tossed aside.
And it was in the sensory, unglamorous reality of L'Arche that Nouwen finalized his understanding of gratitude. Stripped of all his academic armor, he realized that the deepest human need isn't to achieve, to be admired, or to be self-made. The deepest need is simply to be received.
To be known and welcomed.
Exactly. And observing how the core members of L'Arche lived, he coined a phrase that serves as the absolute center of gravity for our discussion today: the discipline of gratitude.
The discipline, not the mood, not the emotion.
Exactly, the distinction that matters. If gratitude is just a feeling, then it is entirely passive. It's a weather pattern that washes over you when you get a raise or when you're sitting on a beach on vacation.
Right, and if it's a feeling, it is only available when external circumstances are favorable, which means it is completely unavailable to you exactly when you need it the most, when life is chaotic, painful, or terrifying.
But a discipline is functionally different. A discipline is a framework you choose before the situation demands it. It is a cognitive muscle you return to after you fail to use it. You practice it precisely because it goes against your natural evolutionary instincts.
So if Nouwen is right, and gratitude is this rigorous cognitive discipline of forcing accurate perception, that implies we are actively overriding our brain's default state, Like we are pulling the steering wheel against the alignment.
That's a great analogy, yes.
Which makes me wonder, does that sustained cognitive effort leave a physical footprint in the body? I mean, we have to shift from philosophy into physiology here to see what actually happens under the skin when we practice this.
And to see that physical footprint, we look at the cardiology lab. In 2015, a cardiologist named Dr. Paul Mills was studying patients diagnosed with asymptomatic heart failure, and he was noticing patterns of disease progression that the standard medical models couldn't fully explain.
Let's define the medical reality for these patients because it's crucial. Asymptomatic heart failure means the heart's pumping function, the ventricular ejection fraction, is measurably compromised.
The engine is failing.
Exactly. But the patient hasn't yet experienced the catastrophic, breathless, fluid-filling symptoms that would land them in the emergency room. They're walking around looking seemingly normal, but they are living in a highly precarious, invisible state of physical risk.
Right. Dr. Mills understood that chronic negative emotion, things like pervasive stress, deep-seated resentment, and hostility, were active biological contributors to heart disease. The mind-body connection wasn't a metaphor for him, it was a mechanism.
So he hypothesized, if negative psychological states accelerate the failure of the heart muscle, could a positive psychological intervention act as a protective barrier?
And he designed a study where he took these specific heart failure patients and had them keep an 8-week gratitude journal. The intervention was remarkably simple.
Just writing down 2 or 3 sentences a day about things they were grateful for.
Exactly, forcing that Emmons-style recognition of external gifts.
And the clinical results of that 8-week period are just staggering. The patients didn't just fill out questionnaires saying they felt a bit more cheerful. Dr. Mills actually drew their blood and measured their biomarkers.
Yeah, the hard data.
The patients who engaged in the daily discipline of gratitude showed a significant, quantifiable reduction in systemic inflammatory biomarkers. Specifically, he tracked a reduction in interleukin-6 and tumor necrosis factor alpha.
Right, and for those unfamiliar with the immunology, interleukin-6 and tumor necrosis factor alpha are cytokines. They are signaling proteins that promote inflammation.
Now, in a healthy immune response, inflammation is a good thing. It fights off acute infections.
But chronic low-grade inflammation is a primary driver of cardiovascular disease progression. It literally damages the blood vessels and the heart tissue over time.
And the patients in Mills' study hadn't changed their diet. They hadn't started a new exercise regimen. They hadn't altered their pharmaceutical medications.
The only variable introduced was the deliberate daily cognitive practice of noticing what was given to them. The psychological discipline literally reached down to the cellular level and turned down the dial on inflammatory cytokines.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because I'm trying to work out an analogy for how this actually functions.
Go for it.
It's like the brain's evolutionary threat detection system is this massive, blaring security alarm. And leaving that alarm on 24/7 is constantly draining the body's battery.
Well, that's good.
Right. Cortisol is flooding the system. The sympathetic nervous system is locked in fight or flight, and immune resources are being diverted to handle a perceived emergency, which spikes that inflammation. Practicing gratitude isn't like putting a happy, colorful screensaver on the monitor while the battery continues to drain in the background. It actually reaches behind the console, finds the wiring for the threat detection alarm, and unplugs it. It saves the physical battery.
That analogy perfectly captures the mechanism. The brain is designed to run that security alarm. The neuropsychologist Rick Hansen provides a brilliant framework for this. He notes that because of our evolutionary history, the human brain acts like Velcro for negative experiences and Teflon for positive ones.
The bad stuff sticks instantly, and the good stuff just slides right off the pan.
Because 1,000,000 years ago, missing a predator meant you were removed from the gene pool. But missing the opportunity to appreciate a beautiful piece of fruit just meant you missed a pleasant snack.
Right.
The cost of a false negative failing to see a threat was death. The cost of a false positive seeing a threat that wasn't there was just a brief spike in heart rate, so we evolved to hold on to the negative.
Well, the problem is, in modern life, we aren't usually running from predators. Yet our brains are still running that ancient emergency software as the default operating system.
We really are. We treat a rude email from a boss or a traffic jam or a social media slight as a life or death survival threat.
The nervous system doesn't know the difference between a lion and a looming deadline. So we run chronically high cortisol levels, our sleep architecture is destroyed, and our cellular aging accelerates.
And the sleep connection is actually one of the most tangible ways people experience this. The data consistently shows that grateful people fall asleep faster, stay asleep longer, and experience deeper restorative sleep phases.
And the mechanism isn't magic. If your brain is Velcro for the negative, what happens when you lie in bed in the dark?
You just spin.
Exactly. With no other distractions, you lie there spinning. You rehearse every grievance from the day. You inventory everything that is missing from your life. You simulate arguments with people who wronged you. Your cognitive focus is entirely narrowed onto threats, which signals to the nervous system that it is not safe to stand down.
But gratitude, as a discipline, physically widens the cognitive field. It forces the brain to catalog safety, provision, and connection, which signals the nervous system to deactivate the alarm so you can actually rest.
So to fully understand how widening the cognitive field changes us, we have to look at the foundational work of Martin Seligman. Seligman is widely considered the godfather of positive psychology.
He is.
But early in his career, in the late 1960s, he was studying the exact opposite. He conducted a famous series of experiments that led to the discovery of learned helplessness.
Those studies were brutal, honestly.
Yeah, they were. He subjected dogs to electric shocks that they could not avoid or escape. Eventually, the dogs stopped trying. Even when the experimental conditions were changed and escape became easily possible, the dogs just lay there and endured the shock.
They had learned, on a profound neurological level, that their actions did not matter.
And Seligman observed the exact same dynamic in humans living in uncontrollable, abusive, or deeply impoverished situations. They developed a pervasive, paralyzing passivity.
The brain learned to be helpless. But what makes Seligman's career so fascinating is that he spent the second half of it flipping his own discovery upside down. He asked this revolutionary question. If helplessness can be learned and neurologically wired into the brain, can flourishing be learned? If we can train the mind into a state of passivity, can we deliberately train it into a state of vitality?
And the answer he found was an emphatic yes, which leads directly to the work of Barbara Fredrickson, a psychologist who developed what she calls the broaden and build theory.
Yes, Fredrickson's work is essential here. Historically, psychology only understood the evolutionary function of negative emotions. Fear makes you run away, anger makes you fight, disgust makes you vomit or avoid poison.
They serve a clear survival purpose. They narrow your cognitive and visual focus to a laser point so you can deal with an immediate, specific threat.
But positive emotions like joy, amusement, and gratitude were largely viewed as evolutionary fluff, just pleasant byproducts of being safe.
Fredrickson argued that positive emotions serve a critical, deeply functional evolutionary purpose, but in the exact opposite direction. They broaden our focus.
Let me make sure I have the mechanism right, though. Fear narrows your vision, so you only see the tiger jumping out of the brush. You don't notice the sky, you don't notice your friends, you just see the teeth.
Just the teeth.
But gratitude broadens your vision. It takes the blinders off. You see the whole landscape. You see the resources you have access to, the social connections around you, the alternative possibilities for action.
By broadening your focus in moments of safety, you build reserves. You build social capital by connecting with others. You build creative problem-solving skills by playing and exploring. You build physical resilience.
That is the absolute essence of broaden and build. Positive emotions are an evolutionary investment strategy. You accumulate psychological, social, and physical resources during periods of safety and abundance so that you have a massive reservoir to draw upon when periods of danger inevitably arrive.
Which they will.
They always do. A person who practices the discipline of gratitude isn't just someone who feels pleasant. Their entire perceptive apparatus has been systematically widened over time. When a severe difficulty arrives, they see the threat, absolutely. But they also see the periphery.
They see the help that is available.
They feel the terror of the moment, but their broadened memory allows them to recall that they have survived terror before.
So what does this all mean? When we stack Mills, Seligman, and Fredrickson together, the takeaway is that gratitude is not a magical cure for the external world. Journaling didn't cure the heart failure in Dr. Mills' lab. It won't magically cure clinical depression or pay off a mortgage.
Yeah.
But it fundamentally changes the person who is enduring those circumstances. It outfits them with a wider field of vision, deeper emotional and physical reserves, and a calmer autonomic nervous system. The external situation might remain exactly as difficult, but the human being meeting that situation is physically and psychologically more whole.
Right. And we've established how this broadened perception heals and fortifies the individual body. But gratitude was never intended to be just a private internal wellness exercise.
Right, it's bigger than that.
We have to shift our lens from internal biology to external sociology. We have to examine how the discipline of gratitude changes the ecosystem around the individual.
We are moving into gratitude as the moral glue of human connection. Which brings us to the research of Michael McCullough, who studies evolutionary psychology.
McCullough argues that if you look at how human communities function, gratitude isn't fundamentally about personal happiness. It is a moral emotion.
It sits in the exact same psychological category as empathy, compassion, or even guilt. It is an evolutionary mechanism designed to orient us toward other people and facilitate reciprocal altruism.
McCullough actually mapped out 3 specific observable functions of gratitude that explain why any society or relationship without it will slowly disintegrate.
Let's go through those.
So the first function is what he calls the barometer. When a person's psychological barometer is functioning properly, gratitude detects that a benefit was freely given to you, and crucially, that it was not owed to you.
Like the rain falls on everyone, but a friend who answers their phone at 2 a.m. and drives across town to help you change a flat tire is different.
Exactly. The barometer detects that a deliberate choice was made, that the person expended their own resources, and that it cost the giver something to benefit you.
The problem is that our barometer fails constantly.
All the time.
We are incredibly prone to misclassifying gifts as entitlements. A teenager assumes their parents' endless patience and financial support is just what parents are supposed to do.
Or we assume a partner's daily sacrifices, making dinner, doing the laundry, listening to us vent, are just the contractual baseline of the relationship.
And when the barometer fails, the receiver stops being moved by the goodness around them, and the giver's unseen labor simply vanishes into the void. It becomes invisible.
But when the barometer actually works and detects a gift, it triggers McCullough's second function, which is motivation.
Because gratitude is not a static state, right? It is highly kinetic.
Very kinetic. When it detects a freely given gift, it motivates a response. Sometimes that looks like direct repayment to the giver, but more frequently, it motivates what we call paying it forward.
Right, like a person who receives radical, unexpected patience from a mentor doesn't just write a thank you note to the mentor. They become a more patient manager to their own employees.
The gift received becomes the template for the gift given. Gratitude creates an entirely different social economy than a simple transactional exchange. A transaction closes the moment the debt is paid. Gratitude creates a pro-social ripple effect that extends outward indefinitely.
Which leads to the third function, the reinforcer. When gratitude is explicitly expressed, like when you actually open your mouth and name what you received and explain what it meant to you, it performs a profound psychological operation on the giver.
It reinforces their pro-social behavior. It tells them that their unseen sacrifice was actually witnessed and that it mattered.
But I want to pause and push back on this on behalf of the listener, because there is a very deeply held, almost romantic assumption in our culture about generosity.
Okay, what is it?
We kind of think that if someone truly loves you, their giving should just be its own reward. Why do they need a gold star? Isn't it kind of selfish or immature to need to be thanked for doing something out of love? If a mother loves her children, shouldn't the act of caring for them be enough?
I mean, it sounds incredibly noble to claim that love is its own reward, but McCullough's evolutionary research and just basic sociological observation reveals a really harsh truth about human nature.
Which is?
We are simply not built for unwitnessed sacrifice. We just aren't. We can sustain it for a short while out of a sense of duty or out of deep initial infatuation. But over a timeline of years, unwitnessed goodness loses its warmth.
It just drains away.
If a person keeps showing up, keeps sacrificing, keeps offering grace, but their presence is treated like expected furniture in the room, the joy of giving slowly inevitably drains away. Expressing specific gratitude isn't about stroking someone's ego. It is about restoring dignity to labor that had begun to feel invisible.
The failure to do this leads to what I think is one of the most heartbreaking concepts in all of the source material we reviewed: funeral gratitude.
Oh, man.
It's the absolute tragedy of waiting to express deep appreciation until someone is literally gone. It's the phenomenon where we only find the vocabulary for what we were given after absence makes the gift impossible to ignore.
A father's quiet, steady patience is suddenly seen with crystal clarity at his graveside.
Or a friend's unshakable loyalty is only recognized after a massive fight causes the friendship to fall apart. We praise the dead for things we never thanked them for while they were alive to hear it.
And in close daily relationships, ingratitude doesn't usually look like a screaming argument. It compounds quietly over time through the relational adaptation problem.
Gives an example of that.
Think about a partner who starts making coffee every morning. During the first week of the relationship, it is a wonderful, surprising gift. You notice it, you express wonder, you feel deeply cared for. But the human mind adapts to consistency. Within a few months, the coffee just exists. It becomes like oxygen or electricity. The extraordinary gift has been downgraded to the expected baseline.
And this is where the danger lies. Because the moment a gift becomes a baseline entitlement, any deviation below it doesn't just feel like a missed gift, it feels like a grievance.
Exactly.
If your partner forgets to make the coffee one morning because they are rushing, suddenly they aren't just distracted, they are a terrible, neglectful partner. Entitlement completely swallows the grace of the relationship. A gift you forgot to be thankful for turns into a weapon you use against them.
But the discipline of gratitude actively interrupts that downward relational drift. As McCullough points out, gratitude has the unique capacity to find and remind.
Find and remind.
It searches the environment to find the gifts that familiarity has cloaked in invisibility, and it reminds you what they represent about the giver's character. It completely changes the emotional climate of a relationship without requiring a single external fact to change.
There is a vital nuance here that we absolutely have to address before we move on. When we talk about finding the good and lowering the alarm system, does practicing gratitude mean you are supposed to just accept unfairness?
Oh, that's a crucial question.
Right. If you are sitting in a toxic workplace with an abusive boss, or if you are in a deeply unequal romantic relationship, or if you are navigating a society with clear systemic issues, does gratitude demand that you just shut up, lower your expectations, and be thankful for the crumbs you were given?
We have to make a very clear distinction here.
Yeah.
Gratitude and justice operate on entirely different levels of the moral ecosystem.
Okay, how so?
Justice is fundamentally concerned with what is owed. Gratitude is fundamentally concerned with recognizing what is given beyond what is owed. They are not mutually exclusive opposites.
So you can fiercely demand fair wages and safe working conditions, and simultaneously be deeply grateful for the unwavering loyalty of the coworker sitting in the cubicle next to you.
Yes. You can name a legitimate injustice with absolute clarity and still recognize the pockets of mercy that exist alongside it.
So gratitude is never, ever an excuse to silence a legitimate complaint. It is never a tool of compliance to tell marginalized or mistreated people to just be happy with what you have.
Absolutely not.
It simply refuses to let complaint become the only language a person knows how to speak. It insists on a complex reality, that you can hold the fierce grievance of what is broken in one hand and the profound grace of what is given in the other at the exact same time.
Which serves as the perfect transition into the ultimate test of this discipline. Everything we've discussed so far is relatively manageable. It is fairly easy to learn to be grateful for a colleague's loyalty or to train yourself to notice your partner's morning coffee. But does this discipline survive when the coffee maker breaks permanently? Does it hold up when the marriage ends, or when the diagnosis is terminal, or when life completely shatters? We have to look at how gratitude functions in the context of deep suffering, loss, and lament.
The darkest seasons. Because this is where gratitude is most easily twisted into toxic positivity.
Henri Nouwen issues a really stark, unflinching warning about this.
Yeah, he writes that gratitude offered too quickly or too glibly in the face of deep suffering is basically abandonment dressed up in tearful language.
It is a defense mechanism. It is a social maneuver to change the subject because pain is uncomfortable to witness. If someone loses a child or receives a devastating medical diagnosis or experiences a profound betrayal and a friend rushes in and says, well, God has a plan, or count your blessings, at least you still have your health, that is not the discipline of gratitude.
No, it's just trying to shut them up.
That is an act of cowardice. It is a way to make the wounded person easier to be around, and it completely invalidates the reality of their devastation.
It's deeply cruel. Our sources agree that mature, durable gratitude must always be preceded by lament. Lament is a concept we have almost entirely lost in modern Western culture.
We really have.
It is the willingness to sit in the ashes with what is lost, to vocalize the pain, without rushing it toward a neat, meaningful conclusion. You have to let the wound be a wound before you can ever ask what the wound might teach you.
And the serious clinical practice of gratitude doesn't skip over lament. It eventually moves through it. And the psychological science backs this up beautifully with the research on post-traumatic growth.
Psychologists Richard Tedeschi and Lawrence Calhoun are the pioneers of this concept, right?
Yes, and they draw a very sharp line between resilience and post-traumatic growth. Resilience is elasticity. It's experiencing a shock, bending, and then bouncing back to the exact baseline you were at before the trauma occurred.
You just snap back.
But post-traumatic growth is different. It is the process of being shattered by an experience, and through the rebuilding process, establishing a completely new, structurally different, and often deeper baseline of existence.
It's important to clarify that not everyone experiences post-traumatic growth, and the researchers are adamant that the presence of growth never justifies the suffering. The trauma isn't secretly a good thing in disguise.
No, the loss is still a loss.
But for those individuals who do experience this profound growth in the aftermath, what is the critical cognitive factor? Tedeschi and Calhoun found it is the ability to hold the wound and the world simultaneously.
It's the capacity to look at reality and say, this event is genuinely terrible. It has taken something irreplaceable from me, and I am still being held by the universe. I am still capable of receiving.
It requires a massive expansion of the psychological container. It is the ultimate expression of holding duality. Let me try to build an analogy for how suffering works on the mind, because suffering is inherently totalizing.
It really is.
It wants to take over everything. Suffering acts like a highly aggressive, self-replicating computer virus trying to rewrite your entire hard drive. It tries to convince your brain that because something ended painfully, the beautiful seasons that came before it were actually a lie.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
A bitter, sudden divorce tries to rewrite a decade of genuine love and shared laughter as a complete sham. A betrayal by a business partner tries to rewrite all your previous successes as manipulation. Suffering demands to be the only lens through which you are allowed to view your entire history. It wants to delete the files of every good thing that ever happened to you.
And Nouwen offers a profoundly compassionate counter-programming to that virus. He points out a very specific hidden fear that many grieving people harbor, the fear of disloyalty to their own grief.
Disloyalty to grief.
People who have suffered a massive loss often feel guilty if they catch themselves laughing at a joke a month later. They worry that if they feel the warmth of the sun on their face, or if they experience genuine gratitude for a good meal, they are somehow betraying the person they lost, or diminishing the severity of the trauma. They feel they must maintain a state of unbroken misery to prove how much they loved what was lost.
But Nouwen argues the exact opposite. He says that grief and gratitude are not enemies at all. In fact, grief is the absolute deepest, most intense form of gratitude that exists. Think about it. You only mourn what was truly a gift in the first place.
The depth of the sorrow you feel is the exact mirrored measure of the gift you were given.
If the person or the experience wasn't a profound gift, you wouldn't be on the floor crying over its absence. Allowing yourself to be grateful again doesn't betray the loss. It actually honors the fact that you haven't let the trauma permanently seal your heart off from the world.
It is a way of saying, what was given to me was real, it was beautiful, and I fully received it, and that is precisely why it hurts this much to lose it. Practicing gratitude in the aftermath of trauma isn't soft. It is an act of immense, almost defiant courage.
It's the courage to remain open and receptive in a world that has already provided empirical proof that it can destroy you.
And how do you even begin to do that when the world feels dark? You don't start by trying to be grateful for the trauma itself. That's impossible.
No, you start microscopic. You start with what Nouwen might call small countersigns against the darkness. You find one tiny point of light. You are grateful for a single, unremarkable meal that stayed down.
You are grateful for the friend who came over, sat on the couch with you, and had the wisdom not to say a single stupid, cheering platitude, but just stayed in the silence.
You are grateful for 1 hour of unbroken sleep. You build the discipline back, one microscopic cognitive movement at a time.
Which brings us inevitably to the final question of this entire exploration. We have traversed the ancient philosophy of the lepers, the cardiology lab of Dr. Mills, the evolutionary sociology of McCullough, and the darkest seasons of grief and post-traumatic growth. The question that remains is implementation. How do we actually build this architecture into our daily lives, starting this afternoon?
We need the practical blueprint. Distilling all these sources, there are 4 actionable levels of practice to build this discipline. Level 1 is attention. And this points directly back to Martin Seligman's famous 3 good things exercise.
As an intervention, it is disarmingly simple, but the clinical data supporting its efficacy is robust. The instruction is this. Every night before you go to sleep, write down 3 specific things that went well that day. But here is the critical mechanism that makes it work. You must write down the why. Why did that good thing happen?
Because the why forces you to execute Emmons' second movement. It forces you to trace the invisible chains of goodness. If you just write, I had a good meeting, that's nice, but it's incomplete.
If you write, I had a good meeting because my colleague stayed late yesterday to prep the slides, covering a gap I missed, you have suddenly traced the gift to a source outside yourself. You are training the brain to look for the unseen labor of others.
Level 2 moves from the internal to the interpersonal. Level 2 is speech. This is Seligman's gratitude visit, or the gratitude letter. The practice is to write a highly specific letter to someone who had a major positive impact on your life, but whom you never properly thanked.
You write down exactly what they did, why it mattered at the time, and how it continues to shape the person you are today. And then, and this is the terrifying part, you arrange to meet them, and you read it to them, out loud, while they are still alive to hear it.
You actively intercept the tragedy of funeral gratitude. Let me assure you, if you do this, it will feel incredibly awkward. It will feel emotionally exposing and vulnerable. Push through that friction.
Because the research shows that delivering that letter radically alters your own self-perception, flooding your system with those broadening positive emotions, while simultaneously giving the recipient the vital, life-affirming confirmation that their unseen labor actually mattered.
Level 3 is conduct. Gratitude cannot remain trapped in a journal. It has to bleed into how we behave in the world. A person who rigorously practices receiving naturally becomes a person who gives.
In a family dynamic, you realize you don't teach kids about gratitude by lecturing them to say thank you like trained parrots. You model it. You name the gifts out loud at the dinner table.
In a corporate workplace, the discipline of conduct looks like the manager who actively scans the ecosystem for the quiet person who always absorbs the extra work without complaining and makes a point to recognize them publicly and compensate them fairly.
And finally, level 4 is posture. This is Nouwen's ultimate lifelong goal. It is the transition from gratitude as an intermittent scheduled exercise like going to the gym to gratitude as an unshakable way of living like breathing.
It is approaching existence with a baseline of wonder. G.K. Chesterton once wrote that gratitude is simply happiness doubled by wonder. It is the ability to look at the incredibly ordinary, mundane elements of your life and realize they were never ordinary to begin with.
But as we hand over this blueprint, we have to inject a dose of clinical realism. If you attempt this discipline, you will fail at it.
Oh, absolutely.
The nightly journaling will lapse, the letters will go unwritten because you get busy, the people you love most will slowly fade back into invisible baselines. Your brain's evolutionary negativity bias will inevitably reassert itself and demand that you focus on everything that is wrong.
And that failure is entirely okay. It is expected. Because the point of a discipline isn't perfect, unbroken consistency. The point is the neural pathways you are building in your brain while you practice.
When you fall off the wagon and slip back into perceptual poverty, those pathways don't vanish. They sit there in the physical architecture of your brain, waiting to be reactivated. Falling away isn't starting over from scratch. It is just an invitation to return. The goal of the discipline is simply the act of returning, over and over again.
So when you catch yourself spinning in resentment, the question isn't a judgmental, why did I fail at being grateful? The question is simply a gentle pivot. What am I going to choose to notice today? What else is true beyond this immediate frustration? What else is true beyond the grief, the exhaustion, and the comparison?
Which brings our entire journey full circle, back to the dusty road in the ancient world, back to the 10 lepers.
Gratitude, at its absolute core, isn't about having the best circumstances. It's not about being the wealthiest, healthiest, or luckiest person in the room. It's about the daily, unremarkable, incredibly difficult, yet enormously consequential act of turning around to look at what has been given to you.
The physical healing, the baseline gift of existence, happened to all 10 men. But wholeness, that deep, resilient integration of the self, was only given to the one who possessed the discipline to turn around.
It is the ultimate discipline of refusing to keep walking as though the astonishing gifts in your life are simply owed to you. I want to leave you listening right now with one final, lingering thought to ponder on your own today.
We spend so much of our time, our energy, and our anxiety striving for the next thing. We want the better circumstance, the higher salary, the perfect relationship, the ultimate goal.
But think about this. If you were miraculously handed the exact life, the exact circumstances, and the exact success you are currently wishing for tomorrow morning, would your untrained mind even be equipped to recognize it as a gift? Or would you simply adapt to it by next Tuesday, expect it as your new baseline, and just keep walking?